Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts, Hiram Mikado and Mark Schreiner, as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. This is Mark Schreiner, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hello, everybody. This is Hiram Machado.
And we would like to welcome you to episode 1 of Secure Talk. Secure Talk is brought to you by Adequest, your trusted cybersecurity and compliance partner. Hiram, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. What about you, Mark?
I'm doing great. This is our first episode, so before we get started, why don't we talk a little bit about your background? I mean, you are the CEO of Adequest. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what Adequest does.
Thank you. I'm very excited to initiate this program with you, Mark. And yes, we have been working with cybersecurity for a while now. We are Microsoft partners, certified partners on EMS, Enterprise Mobility and Security. We help customers with their implementation of security controls throughout their network infrastructure. And I'm happy to be here and share some of our learnings and some of what we have seen and what's the latest around cybersecurity.
Well, cybersecurity is a really fascinating area, and you can go a mile deep or a mile wide. I mean, there are all different aspects of cybersecurity. And again, then there's the whole compliance piece. But today, we want to talk a little bit about this kind of emerging new paradigm in security that's related to also, or tied to the growth in cloud computing and the movement to the cloud. And so maybe you can, before we dive into this new paradigm, can you give us, your quick summary of the traditional view of how organizations would protect their organization in the context of cybersecurity or IT security?
Sure. Yes. Well, not long ago, right? Cloud was non-existent, right? And everybody had your own IT infrastructure, your own data centers. Then the professionalized data centers start to merge, and eventually there is this whole concept of cloud application and the cloud infrastructure. Before the cloud, the perimeter of defense, if you will, right, where you have to put your borders was pretty much, you had a physical data center to protect, right, with who has access to it, who has the right to touch those computers. And
so then, basically, traditionally, most of your IT infrastructure was on-premise.
On-premise,
right?
Yeah.
So with that type of setup, I mean, what kind of security services or infrastructure would companies set up? So, for example, I mean, we have firewalls or...
Right. Yeah, antivirus, firewall, physical access to the server and to the premise where they were. And as long as you close that in, right, and keep that enclosed, you had a limited number of points where security was a problem, right? You had one entry into a data center that you needed to protect. You had people going out on the internet, and you had to make sure that those connections were secure.
So one of the advantages of that traditional approach to security is the fact that you had a certain amount of control, right? I mean, it was basically you had your valuable possessions, and you would, build a perimeter around it and protect that with everything that you could. You'd throw everything into that protective wall, right? I mean, to use a commonly used phrase, it says you build a wall, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That is true, but the reality today is that the landscape has changed, right? And companies, if they want to be competitive, they need to get out of that perimeter, right? It doesn't make sense for organizations to build their own HR systems anymore, right? It doesn't make sense for them to build their own financial systems anymore. So, and SaaS as in software as a service, right, became really the way to go for most organizations.
So is that what's driving this? We haven't even put a name on this new paradigm. Why don't we, when we focus on the stresses to the old style or the traditional approach to cybersecurity, what was putting stress on that? Okay, for example,
cost. It was one, right? It's extremely costly. So it was really a privilege for the bigger organizations to be able to set up a decent infrastructure for them to operate. And
because they'd have to invest in...
It's so much investment in hardware, in physical locations, in personnel, with the expertise to install and maintain
right,
all of the everything that was in there.
I think we saw a number recently that your average Fortune 500 company has something in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 security vendors alone, for IT security vendors. Is that...
Yes, it's over 50 for sure. And when you think about all of the different controls that you have to put in place between, you have an antivirus somewhere over here, you have the firewall that you need to set up, you may have email protection somewhere, and you think about all of the different providers, software providers that compose all of that security. The average enterprise will engage with 50 to 65 different software providers to have that.
So you have all the costs related to that, but then you also have the headache or the hassle of trying to maintain and integrate them all as well. Could be quite troublesome, yeah?
It can be quite troublesome, and besides, there is no really 100% proof security
right.
In the world, right? And not only it's expensive, requires a lot of resources from a different expertise standpoint. If they're not well integrated, there still leave holes from a security perspective.
Right, or seams in the system that can be exploited, right?
Right.
So that was a challenge, but also, I mean, we're seeing the business landscape change as well, because a lot of pretty much everybody these days is bring your own device, right? And then in addition to bring your own device, you have apps. I mean, that puts a stress on the traditional system as well, or the traditional approach. Is that correct?
Yeah, not only bring your own device, the world is going mobile, right? The mobility is pretty much a requirement for almost every professional nowadays, right? The digital transformation is happening where most services or products are being digitalized, if you will, right? If you think about from a taxi industry standpoint, right? With Uber and now the autonomous car, right? That's being digitalized. From your buying experience going to the internet, right? Going from retail to the internet. That all examples of digitalization of services that's coming, but that also brings more financial transactions to the internet, right? It brings more people on the internet, and therefore the overall internet landscape becomes a lot more attractive to people with bad intention.
Oh, got you.
Right? And
so if you're doing business these days, you're pretty much going to be using the internet, right? So it's tough to build a perimeter around that. You can't, right?
Yeah.
If you've got employees, they're going to want to bring their own devices, and how do you enforce your traditional security paradigm on those devices? They're going to want to have their own documents on their devices, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have a system to have some way to protect or segment what's theirs versus what belongs to the company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What you're talking about is the idea. If you go back not too long ago, companies used to provision their own phone for their employees and say, this is the corporate phone. They implement whatever security they felt comfortable with in that phone and tell the employee, you can only use this phone for business purpose. And there was a time where many people had their own phone, personal phone to use, and they have the corporate phone. Nowadays, that's no longer practical or even acceptable, right? And people want to use their own phone. They want to use their latest iPhone, the latest Android, whatever phone you choose. That is what they want to use, and they want to choose it. That's the concept of bring your own device to work. And they want to interact with that phone from a personal and business perspective, right? So they want to have their business stuff as well as the personal stuff there. And the ability to manage, separate what's business from personal and manage that the interaction of that employee with your organization through that device is crucial today for cybersecurity.
And using the traditional paradigm for IT security, it's really challenging to do that. But now we're talking about this new paradigm, okay? That really, it's kind of growing in step with the movement towards the cloud. What can you tell us? What is the basis? In the traditional approach, your perimeter, your wall was the foundation of your security, right? What is the foundation of the new paradigm of security? Where does it start?
Yeah, it's really around identity right now, right? It's
Around
really,
identity. Explain that.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah. Identity, as in now, the concept nowadays is that you need to set up your infrastructure mostly, or most of the time, on the cloud, right? Where you have different connections to SaaS applications, right? Software as a service. You have your infrastructure on the cloud. You have people connecting from the phone. And what you want to do is to understand who is accessing the information, whatever they might be accessing the information. So really it's about understanding how to validate, authenticate, validate, confirm that the people logging in or entering your system are indeed the people that you meant to. And not only that, and that they have access and only access to what they are supposed to have access to.
So if I were an IT admin, how would that work? Give me an example. Walk me through a process here.
Right. Well, right now there are many, the cloud brings, first of all, the cloud brings the whole management of the identity that used to be on-premise, right? That used to be, you have your own Active Directory, that's how they call it, on-premise, and you manage the credentials on that Active Directory. Now, as you migrate that Active Directory to the cloud, right, and you configure all of the different systems through that Active Directory, now you can pretty much say, okay, now for every, I will have roles in place, right? I'll have security parameters in place around each one of those identities that will determine where they can go, right? Wherever I set that up. Okay. So that is what you really need to protect, so right? And think through as you manage your transition from on-premise to the cloud.
Okay, and I guess that always helps. That would also help with people coming and leaving the organization, because when they join the organization, you can set them up with certain authorizations. They're allowed to use this app at this level. They can access this data at this level, and then when they leave the organization, it's simply shutting down that identity. And it's
either leave the organization or move laterally in the organization. For example, if you are in sales and you have certain security parameters around your identity because you belong to the sales organization, and you, because of those security parameters, you may have access to CRM and some other systems, right? If tomorrow you transition to work on HR, just for the sake of the example, you transition to HR, and now you have a different set of applications that you need access to, and you're not supposed to have access anymore to other set of tools. So managing the identity, you can automate that process of migration from one side to another of the business, or when they leave. Yeah.
I've heard you talk about something called just-in-time permissions. Does that relate to identities as well?
It absolutely does, yeah. And it's important nowadays to give you some perspective on that. Administrators or the administrator account is the number one account that hackers are looking for, right? Once they get compromised, once those accounts get compromised, the hacker will have pretty much access to everything on your network. Okay. Right? And used to be that you were either an administrator or you are not, right? Right. Well, now with the just-in-time access, what it means is, okay, so if you are if you have the rights to be an administrator, chances are you don't need to be an administrator permanently, right? Or all the time. You do need administrative access to execute on certain things, right? So with that functionality available today, what you do is, you set yourself up as a regular user, right? And there's a process for you to authenticate yourself as an administrator whenever you want to, right?
And what's the advantage of doing that?
The advantage of doing that, if that administrator account is ever compromised, right, there is a next step for the hacker to become an administrator, usually through what we call MFA, right, multi-factor authentication, right? So if I'm authenticating myself as an administrator, I will receive another, a request, I'll be challenged to prove that I am who I'm saying that I am. And that can be through receiving a code on your phone that you have to type in, and before the system allows you to become an administrator of the
Okay,
system.
so let me see if I get this correct. Basically, what you're saying is hackers, if they breach your system, the first thing they're going to go after are those admin credentials, right?
Absolutely.
They want that. That's the keys to the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And if you're always logged in as an admin and somehow your account is compromised, guess what? The hackers now have access to your account and your rights, right? On the
Correct.
system.
Yes.
So one safeguard against that is nobody should be a permanent admin, because I'm an admin, but I'm not using those. I don't need that right now. So I'm not logged in as an admin. And if my account gets hacked, well, the hackers only have my access to a normal user's rights.
Right.
But when I do need access to my admin role, I can use this just-in-time permission functionality, which will probably force some type of multi-factor authentication, some type of MFA on me. I authenticate. Now, maybe I authenticate for an hour or for a set, for a half hour, whatever it is. I do what I need to do, and then I'm back out. Is that what you're saying?
That is absolutely right.
I think when I heard you explaining this, you gave an example of I think it was a quite famous hack where the I don't remember if it was the CTO, but a very high level person had they turned off their.
There was yes. Deloitte had an issue with being hacked several months ago, and when they investigate the root cause of that breach, what they found out is that one of the administrators of the system who had global administrative access to the system decide to turn off his MFA, right? His multi-factor authentication. Mm-hmm. And his account was compromised, and without an MFA, the hacker was not challenged, right, with a second authentication, and therefore he could, cause damage, and did cause damage to them.
Ouch. Sometimes it's the people with the who are telling us what the best practices are, and then they don't do what they tell us to do, right? It's do as I say, not as I do.
As I do, yes. And on that perspective, Omar, if you didn't know that, most of the when you look at the root cause of any incident, cybersecurity incident, it's often people related, not technology related. Right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it comes down to, something like 80% of successful breaches originate as a phishing campaign, right?
Right.
Somebody clicks on something they probably shouldn't have clicked on.
Right.
Other things are, failing to keep the patches updated, and that's a human thing, right? I mean,
exactly.
you can have a system that will prompt you, but at the end of the day, humans have to set up the system, set up the policy, set up the process, and then adhere to it. So sometimes it just all comes back to basics. Let's go back to this new paradigm in terms of security on the cloud. We happen to, or at AdeQuest, we do a lot of work with Microsoft Azure, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we see some distinct advantages, both from cost and just security point of view, towards using some of the built-in features and functionalities, both with Office 365 and in Azure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, when you think about Office 365, for instance, most organizations have set up their instance and not really looked carefully into the security controls that are available to them. And there is something called Secure Score, right, that Microsoft provides, which is basically looking through a particular instance of Office 365 implementation and see on this instance how many controls or security controls have been put in place. And you get a score for depending on the number that you do. The reality today is, on a scale of 1 to 400, most organizations are around 50. What that means is most organizations have not looked into all of the security controls they have available for them and have not implemented.
So they could make their organization a lot more secure without actually spending any money, right? I mean,
Right, they already paid for it.
Most Fortune 500 companies out there are using Office 365, and if they're not using some of the features and functionalities that are built into it, and they're going out and spending extra money for outside vendors, it's kind of a waste of resources.
And by the way, this statistic is true for small and large organizations. So most organizations have not really looked into it. The thing is, it's not as trivial either, right? Because the reality is, you have to put the right amount of security controls that is in line with what you're trying to secure.
Sure.
Right? It's not like you're not going to spend $20 to secure a $1 bill.
Right.
Right? If you're going to spend $20 on security, you want to make sure that the value of what you're securing is way more than $20. Right? So it's the same concept. So part of it is really understanding the business perspective, right? What's the business security requirements for your organization, and then align those security controls that are available in many cases on your, on Office 365 instances with those business requirements.
Okay. And then in terms of moving to Azure or maybe some of the other cloud providers, I've seen examples, studies that show a lot of the built-in features and functionality, for example, in Office 365, but also in Azure, Microsoft Azure, those can replace a lot of those 40 to 50, 60 vendors that a lot of enterprises are currently paying for, right? And so you can reduce your costs because you have this built-in features and functionality, but you can also simplify. Does that make sense? Because then you don't have to worry about all the updates and is there the latest release, and is this compatible with that, or is there a seam between these two things? I mean, does that make sense?
Well, there is simplification in so many different levels, right? There is, first of all, simplification in terms of licensing, right? Instead of licensing from X number of different service providers.
It's got to be a headache, man. Dealing with just 50 to 60 just for security.
Just for security, yes. So there is that aspect of it, right? So licensing becomes a lot easier to, and then there is the patching and the updates of all of those different systems that it's now integrated.
And plus, actually, you have to have such subject matter expertise
on so many different things. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And then there is the aspect of integration, right? When you're dealing with 40 different service providers, you have an extra layer of having to make sure that they integrate with those different software solutions or security solutions, will integrate and work well with each other. Well, with the cloud providers, you can now consolidate a lot of those. I don't think we have got to a point where everything is there yet, right? Whether you consider Microsoft, Amazon or Google, whatever major cloud provider you might think, I don't think anyone has the full, 50 to 65, A to Z. But that's where they're going. That's where the direction that's.
What would you say to organizations that say, you know what, Microsoft's not a security company? I mean, what would you say to that? I mean, and I'm using Microsoft here just because we do a lot of work with Microsoft. I mean, we work with AWS and other providers as well. But, the majority of the work we do is related to Microsoft services, right? So what would you say to an organization who has that mindset that Microsoft's not a security company? They do Office and they do SharePoint and some other things. But
there are several things to be said about it. Number one is, any cloud provider today, they are in the business of, providing you services, and security and compliance is a big thing, right? Anything that compromises security and compliance in regards to their service can make huge damage to their business, right? So they definitely, first of all, put a lot of investment on it. If you think about Microsoft, for example, they invest over $1 billion in secure solutions every year over year, over $1 billion. There are some companies out there, some independent software providers who are secured, but they are, number one, narrowed in terms of what security they are providing.
Maybe, like you said, antivirus.
It's an antivirus, a firewall, etc. They don't have the whole spectrum. And I can tell you that most of them do not even have $1 billion in revenue, right? So that just to give you the scale of the investment, the massive investment that's being put into security. So the reality is no one can match, right? And that means one thing that I say about Microsoft when it comes to security, if they were not a major cloud provider, right? If they were only Microsoft, if they're not managing data centers as a business, right? They could not afford the level of security that they put for themselves. Right? It's that expensive. And the only reason why they can justify that much expense, $1 billion and more, and counting, is because they are in the business of providing data centers securely, right? And in compliance with the different regulations. And so I don't think anyone else can match that power.
So in Microsoft, I mean, I read Satya Nadel's book. I think it's called Hit Restart.
Yes, Hit Refresh.
Hit Refresh. Thank you. And I remember he dedicated a fair amount of time in the book to talking about the importance of cloud computing, the importance of privacy and security as well, right? Microsoft is clearly committed to that.
And one of the things that he talks very well about that's quite interesting is that as you move to the cloud, it's the data points that you get, right? It's the intelligence that you get to monitor and understand what's going on around the globe. So there is a crime unit at Microsoft that deals only with understanding trends, what's going on, and when they detect the malware, right, being transacted somewhere, when they get that intelligence, they start to plot all of that. They do 400 billion authentications a month. 400 billion
logins, authentications
a month, right? And all of that provide Microsoft metadata, right, in terms of what's going on, if it failed, if it was successful, if there was something that wasn't quite right. And they collect that data and they work directly with FBI, Interpol, and other organizations around the globe to provide them intelligence to combat criminal cyber crimes around the globe.
Right, and then they can also do things like they monitor login patterns, anomalous behavior, etc., and they can feed that back to the Azure Threat Center.
And there was one recent article from Microsoft that showed how quickly they were able to identify a malware that started, I think, in the U.S. By the way, if you didn't know, most malware start in the U.S. and China. Those are by far the top start point of a malware attack, right? So they identified a trend in the U.S. for a handful of their customers. In a matter of seconds, they were analyzing what that was. In a matter of minutes, they had they protect all of the other tenants of that, and in 17 minutes they had it all completed, analyzed, and done. That attack was never successful.
That's amazing.
Not on Microsoft network.
Okay.
Right? Not sure about the others. But for every Microsoft tenant client, it took them 17 minutes from the first time that malware was ever identified anywhere in the world to they having a complete solution that protect all of their customers against that malware. That's how quickly they are able to react to.
And again, we're not here to promote Microsoft, but we are talking about. I mean, obviously, Azure is growing, incredibly fast right now. Microsoft is very strongly committed to the movement of the cloud, and underpinning that is their commitment to security, because nobody's going to want to move all their precious resources to the cloud unless they can trust their cloud service provider. Well, we're kind of running out of time here on episode number 1. Just a quick recap. Traditionally, companies would look at their IT security as they'd build a wall, basically, right? Their perimeter was their defense. Now the identity is the new perimeter, and that's where the IT defense posture starts now. And a lot of that is driven and facilitated by this movement to the cloud. Again, this is our first episode. We'd like to welcome you to the Secure Talk podcast. in upcoming episodes, we are going to look at some current events and talk about what happened, different hacks, different malware, ransomware campaigns, or anything that's interesting or timely. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about some of the core fundamentals of IT security. Things are like data protection. We'll look at compliance requirements related to GDPR, threat detection and protection, and a variety, even physical security, for example. So we'll be digging in deep, because I said earlier, security is a mile-wide topic, and anywhere along that mile-wide breadth of topics, we can really do a deep dive in, and that's what we're looking forward to do in upcoming episodes. But for now, I'd like to thank you for listening. Again, my name is Mark Schreiner, and I'm here with
Hira Machado.
And this is Secure Talk, brought to you by AdeQuest. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance. Join our hosts, Hiram Mikado and Mark Schreiner, as they discuss a wide range of topics and speak with leading cybersecurity, technology, and compliance experts. Now is the time for Secure Talk.